So, you heard the headlines. The U.S. captured Venezuela's president. But what if I told you that was just a smokescreen? What if the real target wasn't a person, but 161 tons of gold? This is the story of a $22 billion heist, and it exposes a hidden war for control of the entire global financial system. Over the weekend, while most of us were sleeping, the news dropped a story that felt ripped from a Hollywood blockbuster. Nicolás Maduro, the strongman leader of Venezuela, captured in a daring pre-dawn raid by U.S. Special Forces. The official story you're hearing is about justice, about finally bringing a man indicted for narcoterrorism to a New York courtroom. It's a clean, simple story of good versus evil. But the real story isn't about the man they took. It's about what he left behind. The true prize wasn't Maduro. It was the keys to his kingdom, a vault holding the largest gold reserve in Latin America. This wasn't a police action. It was a heist, a meticulously planned operation to seize a nation's sovereign wealth and, in the process, send a terrifying message to the rest of the world. Forget drone strikes and tank division. The future of warfare is financial, and you're looking at it. Section 1. The official story of Predator's Dawn. On the surface, the events of early January 2026 look like a textbook victory. The operation, codenamed Absolute Resolve, was a stunning display of American military power. It kicked off in the dead of night, with F-22 Raptors slicing through the skies over Caracas for high-altitude cover. Below, elite Delta Force operators rappelled from night vision-equipped helicopters, descending on the presidential compound. The strikes were vast, hitting not just the residents, but also key military and communication hubs, creating a fog of chaos to cut off any chance of a response. Within minutes, Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, were in custody. There was no big firefight, no dramatic last stand. According to the Pentagon, the operation was surgical to minimize collateral damage, though reports from Caracas told a different story of widespread power outages and a terrified city waking up to the sound of explosions and foreign aircraft. Before the sun was even up, Maduro was on a military transport, flying straight to a federal detention center in New York. The justification for it all was broadcast to the world almost immediately. This wasn't an invasion, officials insisted, but an extradition. Maduro had been under indictment in New York for years on charges of drug trafficking, narco-terrorism, and corruption. The U.S. government framed the raid as overdue justice, the capture of a criminal who let his people starve while turning his country into a narco-state. President Trump, speaking from the White House, called it a decisive step against a criminal regime. He talked about a new dawn for Venezuela, promising a safe and orderly transition to a democratic government. He even vowed that the United States would be a partner in rebuilding the country's shattered economy and, most importantly, its oil infrastructure. The international reaction was, predictably, split. U.S. allies gave cautious support, while nations like Russia and China, longtime backers of Maduro, condemned the raid as a blatant violation of international law, an act of modern-day imperialism. In the UN, there were angry speeches and pointless resolution, but it was all just noise. The facts on the ground had changed, and that's the official story. A clean, compelling narrative of a dictator brought to justice. It's a story made for the history books, a demonstration of American strength and moral righteousness. But it's also a masterclass in misdirection. Because while the world's cameras focused on a man in a prison jumpsuit, the real game was happening far from the public eye. The real story isn't about the man they flew to New York. It's about the $22 billion they left under new management in Caracas. Section 2. The real prize, the Fort Knox of the South. If you want to understand what really happened in Caracas, you have to look past the political theatrics and follow the money. In Venezuela, the money isn't in some bank account you can freeze. It's physical, it's tangible, and it's powerful. It's gold. Venezuela is sitting on 161 metric tons of gold reserves. To put that in perspective, we're talking about over 5.1 million troy ounces of pure gold. It's the largest sovereign gold reserve in all of Latin America, easily dwarfing the holdings of giants like Brazil, with 130 tons, and Mexico, with 120. In a resource-rich continent, Venezuela's gold puts it in a league of its own. For years, that gold was just an anchor, a symbol of wealth from the good old days of oil money. But as U.S. sanctions tightened like a noose, that gold became a lifeline. With its oil industry crippled, and its access to the dollar-based financial system cut off, Venezuela couldn't import food, buy medicine, or pay its soldiers. Gold was the answer. It's the ultimate currency, of last resort, anonymous, physical, and accepted everywhere. You can't sanction a gold bar. You can't deplatform a secret flight carrying bullion. For Maduro's regime, gold was the key to survival, the one tool they could use to bypass the most powerful financial sanctions ever imposed on a country. And the value, in the hours after the raid, as markets freaked out, the price of gold surged, with spot prices jumping to nearly $4,400 an ounce. The value of those 161 tons skyrocketed to a staggering $22 billion. That number, $22 billion, is the heart of this story. It's enough money to prop up a government, pay an army, or, in the hands of a new, U.S.-backed administration, serve as the down payment for a complete corporate takeover of a nation. Taking Maduro was step one. Securing control over how that $22 billion gets spent was the real objective. Think about the strategic play here. The United States didn't just remove a hostile leader. It effectively seized control of the largest liquid strategic asset on the continent. This isn't just about Venezuela anymore. It's about setting a precedent. It's a warning to any other resource-rich nation that defies the United States. Not only is your leadership at risk, but your sovereign wealth, your nation's ultimate insurance policy, can become the prize in a game you're guaranteed to lose. The raid on Caracas wasn't about an indictment. It was about seizing the bank. Section 3. The shadow economy, Venezuela's golden lifeline. So how does a pariah nation, totally locked out of the global banking system, turn 161 tons of solid gold into food, fuel, and power? The answer is a complex shadow economy, a real-life financial thriller that the U.S. raid was designed to decapitate. For years, the U.S. Treasury Department fought a quiet war against this network, trying to track suspicious flights, untangle shell companies, and pressure countries from Africa to the Middle East to reject Venezuela's gold. But the Maduro regime was surprisingly creative. They learned to operate in the dark. It all started in a vast, lawless region of Venezuela, known as the Arco Minero del Orinoco, where dirty gold is mined under brutal conditions. From there, it was transported under heavy military guard to the central bank in Caracas, but it never stayed for long. The gold then began its journey into the global shadow financial system. At first, the regime just loaded tons of it onto Russian jets and flew it directly to buyers. One of their biggest workarounds was an alliance with Turkey. Venezuelan gold would fly to Istanbul, get refined to hide its origin, and then be sold or swapped for goods. Turkey, often at odds with the U.S. itself, was a happy partner in a scheme that chipped away at the dollar's dominance. When the U.S. cracked down on the Turkey connection, the network just adapted. Gold started flowing through new channels, flights to countries in Africa and the Middle East, where it was swapped directly for pallets of cash, which were then flown back to Venezuela. In other cases, the gold was used as collateral for secret loans from allies who were also interested in a non-dollar world. This was more than just smuggling. It was the construction of an alternative financial system. Every time Venezuela sold a ton of gold, without using a single U.S. bank or dollar, it was a small victory in a much bigger war against American financial power. Washington watched with growing alarm. The problem wasn't just that Maduro was staying in power. He was creating a proof of concept for other sanctioned nations like Iran or Russia, showing them it was possible to survive outside Washington's reach. The Venezuelan gold trade became a symbol of defiance, a working model of a de-dollarized world, and that was a threat that couldn't be ignored. Chasing flights and sanctioning middlemen wasn't enough. It was like fighting a hydra. The strategists in Washington realized that to kill the system, they had to go for the heart. They had to seize the source. The raid wasn't just about capturing a man. It was about repossessing the asset that fueled this entire anti-dollar ecosystem. Section 4. The heist's blueprint. Why now? Why the gold? Don't think for a second. The timing of Operation Absolute Resolve was an accident. It happened at the perfect moment, when seizing Venezuela's gold became a strategic necessity for the United States. To understand why now, you have to see how three powerful motives came together: killing a threat to the dollar, seizing a nation's economic future, and creating a terrifying new blueprint for global power. First, and most importantly, this was a major play in the wealth wars. America's real superpower isn't its aircraft carriers. It's the US dollar. It lets the US borrow cheap, run huge deficits, and wield financial sanctions as its weapon of choice. Venezuela's gold-based shadow economy, while small, was a dangerous idea. It was a working model for how a country could challenge the dollar by partnering with other nations looking to break free from American influence. Venezuela was building the plumbing for a post-dollar world. The raid was a loud, brutal message to anyone else thinking of trying it. There is no escape. Second, the raid was about control. With Maduro gone, the way is clear for a US-friendly government. And that's where President Trump's promise to help rebuild Venezuela's energy sector gets interesting. That $22 billion in gold is the key. A new government, guided by Washington, will control those assets. But that gold won't be for social programs. It will be used as collateral for loans from the IMF and World Bank, loans that come with serious strings attached. It will pay off international creditors, and it will finance the contracts given to U.S. energy giants like Halliburton and Chevron to modernize Venezuela's oil fields, which happen to be the largest on the planet. This wasn't liberation. It was a hostile takeover of a country, with the gold as the down payment and the oil as the long-term prize. Third, and this is the chilling part, this is a blueprint for the future. The Venezuela operation created a new doctrine for regime change. The old way, large-scale, boots-on-the-ground invasions like in Iraq, is expensive, messy, and a political nightmare. The new model is regime decapitation, and asset seizure. It's faster, cleaner, and brutally efficient. You use special forces to take out the leadership. You immediately secure the country's most valuable assets, and you use that wealth to finance the transition you want. This playbook can now be aimed at any resource-rich nation that gets in Washington's way. It's a warning to leaders everywhere. Your greatest national treasure could become the very tool used to overthrow you. Section 5. The market's verdict. Shockwaves and your portfolio. When a geopolitical bombshell like this drops, it doesn't just stay in the world of politics. It sends shockwaves through the financial markets, and that's where this story starts to hit your wallet. For investors, this wasn't some distant news story. It was a seismic jolt that created huge risks and opportunities overnight. The market's reaction was instant and brutal. The biggest winner, gold. As news of the raid broke, traders everywhere piled into the ultimate safe haven asset. The price of spot gold leaped 1%, hitting $4,374.92 an ounce. This wasn't just a minor blip. It was the market pricing in a new, terrifying level of global instability. If a country's sovereign gold isn't safe in its own central bank, then the only safe gold is the gold you hold yourself. The tidal wave lifted other precious metals, too. Silver, poor man's gold, shot up 2.4% to $74.32 an ounce. Platinum jumped 3.1% to $2,209.60 an ounce, reflecting fears of broader chaos in the commodity markets. And then there's oil. Venezuela sits on over 300 billion barrels of proven reserves, the largest on Earth. While the market had been worried about too much supply, the raid threw a wrench in everything. Brent crude, which was sitting around $60 a barrel, suddenly faced intense upward pressure. The fear isn't about current production, which is tiny, but about control. A stable, US-backed Venezuela could eventually flood the market and crash prices. But in the short term, the chaos could take that oil off the table for years, causing a massive supply shock. This uncertainty is poison for stability, but rocket fuel for speculators. So what does this all mean for you? First, the argument for owning gold has never been stronger. Analysts are now predicting gains of 10% to as high as 60% this year. The raid proves the theory. In a world of paper currencies and political turmoil, gold is the only real money. Central banks, already big buyers, will now accelerate their purchases. They saw what happened in Caracas. An allocation to physical gold and silver in your portfolio is no longer just a hedge. It's a core strategic position. Just think about it. With 161 metric tons, every $100 increase in the price of gold adds another $500 million to the value of the prize in Venezuela. That's the leverage at the heart of this conflict. But the risks are just as real. This kind of volatility cuts both ways. Analysts also warn of sharp, brutal corrections in gold, maybe as much as 20%, triggered by profit-taking, or if the U.S. installs a stable government faster than expected. Volatility is the new normal. Your investment strategy has to treat gold and silver as essential insurance policies, and recognize that global power games now have a direct and immediate impact on your financial security. CTA call to action. If you want to protect your wealth in the years to come, you have to understand these hidden wars. It's not just about charts and data anymore. It's about power, resources, and control. The real forces moving the markets are often buried beneath the headlines, and the story of Venezuela's gold is a perfect example. If you want more deep dives that expose the real stories shaping the global economy and your wallet, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. This knowledge isn't optional anymore. It's essential. Join our community of independent thinkers by subscribing now. Conclusion: the New World Order. The capture of Nicolás Maduro was presented as a triumph of justice. But as we've seen, that official story is a carefully built illusion. The real narrative isn't about the arrest of one man. It's about the calculated seizure of a nation's wealth. This was not a police action. It was the largest asset heist in modern history, disguised as a military operation. What happened in Caracas marks a fundamental shift in the nature of global power. Financial warfare is no longer a theory. It's a devastatingly effective reality. The United States has declared, through its actions, that national sovereignty is conditional on playing by the rules of the U.S.-led financial system. The $22 billion prize, Venezuela's gold, is now a tool to be used by its enemies to reshape the country's destiny. The blueprint has been written. Remove the leader, seize the wealth, and install a new regime financed by the very assets of the nation it now controls. This raid signals the start of a new, more ruthless era, and it leaves us with a sobering question. Who's next? Which resource-rich nation will be the next to find its leader targeted and its sovereign wealth on the line? In a world where a country's treasury can be emptied in a pre-dawn raid, we have to rethink what words like sovereignty, wealth, and power really mean. What do you think this means for the future? Let me know.